I never imagined my wedding day would end with my father storming out and my mother declaring I had destroyed the family legacy forever. Senator Richard Hartwell couldn't stomach watching his daughter marry Jake Thompson, a small-town mechanic with grease under his fingernails, instead of political ambitions in his heart. As 300 guests whispered behind champagne glasses, Mom hissed through tears that my impulsive decision would ruin everything we built. Little did they know the photo I was about to send would change absolutely everything about their precious political dynasty. Growing up as Senator Richard Hartwell's daughter meant every moment of my life was calculated for maximum political advantage. Our Georgetown mansion hosted Supreme Court justices for dinner parties, foreign ambassadors for charity auctions, and presidential candidates for strategy meetings. My childhood bedroom overlooked the Potomac River, but the view came with invisible chains of expectation that grew heavier each year. Mom spent 28 years grooming me for this life. Patricia Hartwell, former Virginia debutante, turned political wife, scheduled my days with ballet lessons, French tutoring, and etiquette classes. She enrolled me at exclusive private schools where senators' children learned to network before they learned algebra. Every summer meant internships on Capitol Hill. Every weekend involved political fundraisers where I smiled prettily while adults discussed legislation that would affect millions of lives. Dad expected me to marry within the political aristocracy. His campaign manager, Bradley Stevens, had been orchestrating my romantic life since high school, introducing me to promising young men destined for political careers. Congressional aides with Harvard Law degrees, Supreme Court clerks, with perfect pedigrees, and ambitious prosecutors eyeing judgeship appointments. All of them treated courtship like a merger negotiation, calculating how our combined political capital could advance their careers. Everything changed when my BMW broke down during a campaign stop in Millfield, Virginia. Dad was visiting rural constituents, delivering his usual speech about supporting hardworking American families while secretly planning to vote against minimum wage increases. My car started smoking on the town's main street, forcing me to seek help at Thompson's Auto Repair. Jake Thompson emerged from beneath a pickup truck, wiping motor oil from calloused hands with a shop rag. 29 years old, with honest brown eyes and a genuine smile that reached all the way to his soul. He diagnosed my transmission problem within minutes, explaining the repair in terms I could understand without talking down to me. Most politicians' sons would have seen a broken car as an inconvenience requiring immediate attention from servants. Jake saw an opportunity to help someone in need. We talked while he worked, discovering shared interests in old movies, hiking trails, and dreams beyond the narrow confines of our respective worlds. He loved fixing things with his hands, creating something useful from broken pieces. I envied that tangible satisfaction so different from the abstract manipulation of political maneuvering. Our secret relationship developed over 8 months of careful meetings. I drove to Millfield whenever possible, telling my parents I was volunteering for various charitable organizations. Jake and I explored Virginia's countryside, hiking through Shenandoah National Park and eating at roadside diners where nobody recognized the senator's daughter. For the first time in my life, I experienced authentic connection with someone who valued my thoughts rather than my family connections. Jake proposed on a quiet hillside overlooking the Blue Ridge Mountains. No cameras, no political calculations, just two people promising to build something real together. The engagement ring came from his grandmother's jewelry box rather than a high-end Georgetown store, but it represented genuine love instead of strategic alliance. Planning our wedding became a battlefield. Mom insisted on the Chevy Chase Country Club with its crystal chandeliers and marble floors. Dad demanded a guest list including every major political figure on the East Coast. They hired event planners who specialized in political galas caterers, familiar with dietary restrictions of foreign diplomats and photographers, experienced in capturing historically significant moments. Jake's family consisted of his widowed mother, Margaret, who cleaned houses for wealthy families in Northern Virginia. She seemed nervous around the wedding preparations, declining most invitations to planning meetings and avoiding conversations with my parents. I attributed her discomfort to social anxiety, understanding how intimidating the political elite could appear to ordinary working people. The ceremony itself unfolded like a political convention rather than a celebration of love. 300 guests filled the country club's main ballroom, including senators, congressmen, federal judges, and military contractors. Bradley Stevens coordinated everything with military precision, ensuring proper protocol for each dignitary's entrance and seating arrangement according to political hierarchy. My wedding dress came from a designer who specialized in formal political events. The 12-foot train required 3 bridesmaids to manage, while the cathedral veil created dramatic photos suitable for newspaper society pages. Everything about my appearance was calculated to project the image of political royalty maintaining bloodline purity. Dad refused to walk me down the aisle, claiming Jake was beneath our family's station in American society. He stood rigidly in the front row, arms crossed and jaw clenched, while Mom sobbed into a silk handkerchief. Their public display of disapproval sent whispers rippling through the assembled crowd, creating exactly the kind of political scandal they'd spent years avoiding. Bradley Stevens attempted damage control, whispering explanations to curious guests about temporary family disagreements and emotional stress of campaign season. But nothing could disguise the obvious truth that the senator's family was fracturing in real time before Washington's most influential witnesses. During the reception, Mom cornered me near the wedding cake, her carefully applied makeup streaked with tears of rage and disappointment. 28 years of careful cultivation destroyed for a man who changes oil for a living. She hissed loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Your impulsive decision will ruin everything we've built in this city." Dad stormed out during the first dance, taking half the wedding guests with him. Federal judges, corporate executives, and foreign ambassadors followed the senator's lead, abandoning their dinner plates and champagne glasses to distance themselves from our family's public disgrace. Local news crews arrived within the hour, drawn by tips from political rivals, eager to document our humiliation. Jake and I stood in the emptying ballroom, surrounded by half-eaten meals and abandoned wedding gifts, watching our special day transform into a public relations disaster. The photographers continued snapping pictures of our devastation, creating images that would appear in tomorrow's political gossip columns. Just as we contemplated fleeing to our honeymoon destination early, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Congratulations on marrying my son. We need to meet immediately. Lives depend on it. Margaret Thompson, Jake's mother." The message's urgency sent chills down my spine. Margaret had seemed like a simple woman who preferred staying in the background, but something in those words suggested hidden depths I'd never suspected. The drive to Millfield took 2 hours through winding Virginia back roads past tobacco farms and horse pastures that seemed worlds away from Georgetown's political intensity. Jake gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white with confusion and growing concern. His mother had always been predictable, quiet, and unassuming. Emergency meetings weren't part of Margaret Thompson's usual vocabulary. "She's never talked like that before," Jake muttered for the 10th time, glancing at my phone where the mysterious text remained displayed. "Mom avoids drama like the plague. Something's seriously wrong if she's demanding immediate meetings and mentioning lives depending on anything." We pulled into the gravel driveway of Margaret's modest farmhouse as twilight painted the sky deep purple. The house sat on 40 acres of rolling meadow surrounded by split-rail fencing and ancient oak trees. Jake's childhood home looked exactly like what it was supposed to be, a simple dwelling for a hardworking widow who supported herself through honest labor. Margaret opened the front door before we reached the porch steps, her face grave with an expression I'd never seen before. Gone was the timid woman who cleaned wealthy homes and spoke in whispered tones around my family. Standing before us was someone else entirely, someone whose eyes held depths of knowledge and pain that suggested experiences far beyond domestic work. "Come inside quickly," she said, scanning the empty rural road behind our car. "We don't have much time to explain everything you need to understand." The farmhouse interior reflected Margaret's supposed simple life. Handmade quilts covered comfortable furniture, family photographs lined the mantelpiece, and the kitchen smelled of homemade bread. But something felt different now, as if I was seeing stage props rather than authentic personal belongings. Margaret led us to the kitchen table, pouring coffee from a pot that suggested she'd been waiting for hours. Her hands shook slightly as she set down the ceramic mugs, and I noticed calluses that seemed inconsistent with house cleaning work. These looked like hands that had handled more than vacuum cleaners and floor mops. "My name isn't really Margaret Thompson," she began, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. 25 years ago, I was Margaret Blackwood's Central Intelligence Agency operative specializing in domestic counterintelligence operations. I went into deep cover after uncovering a massive political corruption ring that threatened national security. Jake's coffee mug slipped from his fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor and sending ceramic shards across the room. "What are you talking about, Mom? You've cleaned houses my entire life. You raised me alone after Dad died in that car accident." Margaret's eyes filled with tears as she knelt to clean up the broken pieces. "Your father wasn't killed in any accident, sweetheart. David Blackwood was an investigative journalist who got too close to exposing this corruption ring. They murdered him when you were 3 years old, making it look like mechanical failure on a mountain road." The revelation hit Jake like a physical blow. He doubled over in his chair, struggling to process information that rewrote his entire personal history. The man he'd mourned as an unlucky victim of circumstance had actually been assassinated for pursuing dangerous truths. I fled into witness protection. Margaret continued gathering the ceramic fragments into her apron. The CIA created the Margaret Thompson identity, placed me in rural Virginia, and gave me employment that would allow surveillance of wealthy political families. For 25 years, I've worked as a cleaning lady in Georgetown mansions, listening to private conversations and photographing confidential documents. She disappeared into the pantry, returning with a wooden box filled with recording devices, tiny cameras, and document copies. 25 years of patient intelligence gathering had produced evidence of corruption reaching the highest levels of American government. The ring involves dozens of politicians from both parties, Margaret explained, spreading photographs across the kitchen table. They've been selling military secrets to foreign governments, laundering money through defense contracts, and assassinating anyone who threatens to expose them. Your father, Senator Richard Hartwell, has been a key player for 15 years. My stomach dropped as I recognized Dad's face in several photographs, accepting briefcases full of cash from men I didn't recognize. Other pictures showed him at private meetings with foreign nationals, signing documents in unmarked office buildings, and participating in discussions that clearly involved illegal activities. Bradley Stevens runs the operation. Margaret continued, pointing to photos of Dad's campaign manager coordinating meetings and transferring money. He recruited your father through blackmail after discovering affairs and financial improprieties. Most politicians in the ring started as victims before becoming willing participants. Jake stared at evidence that his mother had lived a double life for his entire childhood, protecting him from knowledge that could have gotten them both killed. Why are you telling us this now? Why reveal everything after staying hidden for decades? Margaret's expression grew even more serious as she pulled out recent surveillance photos. Because your father just accepted nomination for Secretary of Defense. If confirmed, he'll have access to classified information that could expose foreign agents the ring has been working with. National security will be compromised on an unprecedented scale. She showed us military contract proposals, foreign intelligence communications, and assassination target lists that painted a terrifying picture of treason operating at the highest government levels. The corruption ring had been positioning themselves for this moment when control of defense secrets would allow them to sell America's most vital national security information. They also know you married into the Hartwell family, Margaret added grimly. That makes you both targets now. They're afraid I'll use family connections to expose them, so they've decided to eliminate all three of us before confirmation hearings begin. As if summoned by her words, Margaret's secure communication device began beeping with urgent alerts. Her face went pale as she read encrypted messages scrolling across a small screen hidden inside what appeared to be an ordinary kitchen radio. "We need to leave immediately," she said, jumping to her feet and grabbing emergency bags from beneath the kitchen sink. "Assassins are en route to this location. We have less than 10 minutes before they arrive." Margaret's transformation from timid cleaning lady to experienced intelligence operative was stunning to witness. Within seconds, she had retrieved emergency supplies, activated hidden security protocols, and begun implementing escape procedures that spoke of decades of training and preparation. "Follow me to the basement," she commanded, leading us through a concealed door behind the pantry shelves. "Everything you need to understand is down there." The basement revealed Margaret's true life's work. The space had been converted into a sophisticated intelligence operations center with walls covered in surveillance photographs, financial charts tracing money laundering operations, and maps marking locations of illegal activities across 3 continents. Computer equipment hummed quietly in climate-controlled cabinets, while encrypted communication devices monitored multiple government and criminal networks simultaneously. "This is 25 years of patient investigation," Margaret explained, gesturing toward thousands of documents organized in precise filing systems. "Every conversation I overheard while cleaning, every document I photographed, every financial transaction I traced. Enough evidence to bring down 30 politicians and expose an international conspiracy threatening American national security." Jake wandered through the underground facility in stunned silence, examining surveillance photos of his mother meeting with CIA handlers, participating in covert operations, and documenting criminal activities that reached the highest levels of government. The woman who had raised him in apparent simplicity had actually been conducting one of the most important counterintelligence operations in recent American history. "The corruption ring operates like a shadow government." Margaret continued, pointing to organizational charts showing connections between politicians, defense contractors, and foreign intelligence services. "They've manipulated defense contracts worth billions of dollars, sold classified military technology to hostile nations, and eliminated anyone who threatened to expose their activities." She showed us audio recordings of Senator Hartwell accepting bribes, video surveillance of Bradley Stevens coordinating murders, and financial documents proving money laundering operations spanning 15 years. The evidence painted a picture of systematic treason operating under cover of legitimate political activity. "They plan to eliminate us within 48 hours. Margaret explained, checking multiple surveillance monitors showing approaches to the farmhouse. Stevens knows I'm here, knows you married into the family, and considers all three of us existential threats to their operation. Timeline is critical because confirmation hearings begin Monday morning. The scope of evidence was overwhelming. Bank statements showing millions in offshore accounts, correspondence with foreign intelligence services, photographs documenting secret meetings between American politicians and foreign agents, and detailed plans to sell military secrets once Dad became Secretary of Defense. Your access to the Hartwell family creates a unique opportunity, Margaret told me, pulling out architectural plans for my parents' Georgetown mansion. Only someone with family clearance can get close enough to plant surveillance devices and gather final pieces of evidence needed to expose the entire network. Jake immediately objected to using me as an undercover operative. Absolutely not. These people murder journalists and government agents. I won't let my wife walk into that kind of danger. Margaret's expression softened with understanding, but her voice remained firm. The alternative is watching them complete their plan. Once your father becomes Secretary of Defense, they'll have access to information that could compromise American agents worldwide. Hundreds of lives will be at stake, not just ours. The weight of responsibility was crushing. My privileged upbringing had prepared me for charity galas and political networking, not espionage operations against international criminals. But the evidence surrounding us proved that innocent people had already died for this information, and many more would die if we failed to act. As we planned our next moves, Margaret's communication equipment began broadcasting urgent alerts. She rushed to the main monitoring station, her face going pale as encrypted messages appeared on multiple screens. "They found us," she whispered, pointing to satellite surveillance images showing black SUVs approaching through the rural Virginia countryside. "Stevens' people are less than 5 minutes away." But the immediate danger was worse than approaching assassins. Margaret's computer screens displayed a timer counting down from 6 minutes connected to explosive devices planted throughout the farmhouse above us. The corruption ring hadn't just sent killers. They'd rigged the entire property to destroy 25 years of evidence and eliminate us simultaneously. "Emergency evacuation protocols now," Margaret shouted, grabbing portable hard drives containing backup files while Jake and I gathered essential documents. "Everything we've worked for dies if we don't reach the escape tunnel within 4 minutes." We raced through the underground facility, grabbing critical evidence, while Margaret activated data destruction protocols to prevent the corruption ring from discovering what information we'd managed to preserve. The countdown timer showed 3 minutes and 47 seconds as we reached a concealed tunnel entrance behind the facility's communication equipment. The escape tunnel stretched 200 yards through underground passages that emerged near an abandoned barn on neighboring property. Margaret had spent years preparing for this exact scenario, creating multiple escape routes and establishing emergency protocols that could preserve her intelligence operation even if the primary location was compromised. Behind us, the farmhouse exploded in a fireball visible for miles across rural Virginia. 25 years of patient investigation disappeared in seconds, along with irreplaceable evidence of government corruption and international conspiracy. But Margaret's careful planning had preserved the most critical files, ensuring our escape with enough information to continue the fight. We reached Margaret's emergency vehicle hidden in the abandoned barn, just as black SUVs surrounded the burning farmhouse. Our escape had succeeded by mere minutes, but the corruption ring now knew we possessed dangerous information and would stop at nothing to prevent its exposure. The abandoned Cold War bunker hidden beneath a defunct gas station represented 40 years of American paranoia converted into sanctuary for modern patriots. Margaret had discovered this facility during her CIA training, later securing access through classified channels that allowed intelligence operatives to maintain emergency safehouses off official records. Descending into the bunker felt like traveling backward through time. Original 1960s equipment lined concrete walls designed to withstand nuclear attack, while updated computers and communication systems provided connection to modern intelligence networks. Emergency supplies could sustain small groups for months, and sophisticated security systems monitored approaches from multiple directions. "Welcome to the Resistance," Margaret announced as we entered the main chamber, where 4 additional people waited around a conference table covered with maps, photographs, and classified documents. Colonel Sarah Martinez stood first, extending a firm handshake that reflected decades of military leadership experience. Her steel gray hair was pulled into regulation style, and her bearing suggested someone accustomed to command authority in dangerous situations. Former military intelligence currently coordinating private security operations for whistleblowers and patriotic Americans fighting government corruption. Dr. David Chen emerged from behind banks of computer equipment, his thick glasses reflecting screens filled with encrypted data streams. Former National Security Agency cryptologist specializing in digital forensics and secure communications. "I've been tracking this corruption ring through electronic surveillance for 8 years. Agent Lisa Parker appeared younger than the others, perhaps early 30s, with the carefully neutral expression of someone accustomed to maintaining multiple identities simultaneously. Active Federal Bureau of Investigation agent, working deep undercover within Stevens' organization. Everything you've discovered confirms intelligence we've been gathering through official channels." Thomas Wright possessed the alert awareness typical of personal protection specialists, his eyes constantly scanning entrances and monitoring security feeds. Former Secret Service now coordinating resistance operations across multiple government agencies. "We have allies throughout Washington, but official channels are compromised." The scope of their operation was breathtaking. For years, patriotic government employees had been documenting corruption while maintaining their official positions, gathering evidence through channels the criminals couldn't monitor or control. Margaret's intelligence provided missing pieces that connected isolated incidents into a comprehensive picture of systematic treason. "The corruption ring has been operating for 30 years. Colonel Martinez explained, pointing to timeline charts showing escalating criminal activities. Started with small defense contract manipulation, evolved into international arms dealing and money laundering. Now they're positioning themselves to control classified information that could compromise American security worldwide." Dr. Chen's computers displayed financial networks spanning dozens of countries, showing how stolen American tax dollars had been converted into foreign accounts and used to purchase influence with hostile governments. The amount of money involved was staggering, representing billions of dollars diverted from legitimate defense programs. They've orchestrated assassinations of 12 journalists and whistleblowers over 15 years. Agent Parker added grimly, showing photographs of murdered investigators who had gotten too close to exposing the truth. "Your husband's father was their first victim, but certainly not their last." The personal connection hit Jake like physical pain. Learning that his father's murder was part of a broader pattern of political assassination made the loss feel both more meaningful and more tragic. David Blackwood had died pursuing justice, but his sacrifice had contributed to this moment of potential exposure and accountability. Thomas Wright spread architectural plans across the table showing government buildings, private residences, and corporate offices throughout Washington. "We've identified 67 locations where evidence-gathering operations could provide final proof needed for mass arrests and prosecutions." Margaret's backup files had preserved crucial information, but digital copies were scattered across encrypted servers worldwide. Dr. Chen worked to consolidate evidence while maintaining security protocols that prevented the corruption ring from tracking or destroying additional proof. "Your intelligence background isn't coincidence," Margaret told me, revealing documents about my maternal grandfather's Office of Strategic Services career during World War II. Robert Hamilton was one of America's most effective intelligence operatives, specializing in infiltrating enemy organizations and gathering information under extreme pressure. Those skills are hereditary more often than people realize. Learning about family history I'd never known added another layer of surreal discovery to an already overwhelming situation. My grandfather's wartime service had remained classified, but his techniques for gathering intelligence and maintaining cover identities provided genetic foundation for abilities I was only beginning to understand. Colonel Martinez began teaching me basic surveillance techniques, showing how to plant recording devices recognize when being followed and communicate through encrypted channels. The training felt natural, as if awakening dormant instincts inherited from my grandfather's intelligence work. Dr. Chen demonstrated digital security protocols explaining how to access secure networks and transmit information without detection. Agent Parker shared techniques for maintaining cover identities and extracting information through casual conversation. Thomas Wright provided basic self-defense training, preparing me for physical confrontations that seemed increasingly likely. The intensive preparation continued for hours until Agent Parker received an urgent message through her encrypted communication device. Her expression shifted to alarm as she read details about an unexpected development that changed everything. "They have your sister," she announced grimly, showing photographs of 22-year-old Emma Hartwell being forced into an unmarked vehicle outside Georgetown University. "Stevens discovered our location through cell phone tracking. They're using Emma as leverage to force your surrender." The photographs showed Emma bound and terrified, with accompanying audio messages demanding my immediate surrender in exchange for her safety. Stevens had escalated the situation beyond political corruption into personal terrorism, threatening family members to prevent exposure of his criminal enterprise. 12 hours to surrender yourself, or Emma dies." Agent Parker continued, her voice heavy with the weight of impossible choices. "They want you alive for interrogation, believing you have information about our entire operation." Jake's rage was immediate and overwhelming. "We rescue Emma first, expose the corruption later. I won't let them hurt Melody's family to protect their criminal enterprise." But the tactical situation was complex beyond simple rescue operations. Stevens had chosen this moment carefully, knowing that confirmation hearings would begin within days and that emotional leverage might succeed where direct threats had failed. The three-pronged operation required perfect timing and flawless execution with zero room for error. Margaret's team had less than 12 hours to simultaneously rescue Emma, gather final evidence, and expose the corruption ring before they could eliminate witnesses and complete their seizure of Defense Department control. Melody infiltrates the Georgetown mansion during tonight's confirmation celebration fundraiser, Colonel Martinez explained, pointing to surveillance photos of my parents' home being prepared for the political gathering. 50 high-profile targets will be present, creating perfect opportunity to record conversations and identify additional ring members. Jake and Colonel Martinez would attempt Emma's rescue from the Baltimore warehouse where Stevens was holding her prisoner. Agent Parker had provided detailed intelligence about guard position security systems and building layout based on her undercover access to the organization's operational planning. Meanwhile, Margaret and Dr. Chen would coordinate the evidence release using encrypted networks to simultaneously distribute proof to major newspapers, FBI headquarters, Pentagon security, and congressional oversight committees. The timing had to be perfect to prevent evidence suppression through the ring's media and government connections. My infiltration began with a phone call to Mom pretending reconciliation after realizing the mistake of marrying beneath my social station. Patricia Hartwell's relief was audible as I claimed to understand how my impulsive decision had damaged the family's political standing and expressing willingness to work toward repairing relationships. "Come home for your father's confirmation celebration," she pleaded through tears of joy. "Bradley has been planning this event for months, and your presence would demonstrate family unity during this crucial moment in your father's career." The Georgetown mansion was already bustling with preparation when I arrived, carrying hidden recording devices concealed within my purse and jewelry. Event planners coordinated final details, while catering staff arranged elaborate displays suitable for Washington's political elite. Mom embraced me with genuine emotion, her relief at my apparent change of heart, overwhelming any suspicion about my sudden transformation. "I knew you'd realize that love isn't enough without social compatibility and shared values. Jake seemed like a nice young man, but he could never understand our world or help advance your future." Dad's reaction was more cautious, studying my face for signs of deception, while expressing measured satisfaction at my apparent return to family loyalty. Political careers require sacrifices that ordinary people can't comprehend. "I'm glad you've learned that lesson before causing permanent damage to opportunities that took decades to develop." Bradley Stevens greeted my arrival with barely concealed suspicion, his calculating eyes searching for hidden motives behind my unexpected appearance. "Lovely to see you again, Melody. I trust you've gained perspective about the importance of family unity during politically sensitive periods." The fundraiser began at 7 in the evening, with guests arriving in chauffeur-driven vehicles and private security details. Senators, congressmen, federal judges, military contractors, and foreign diplomats filled the mansion's reception areas, creating exactly the kind of gathering where criminal conspiracy could hide behind legitimate political networking. I moved through the crowd with practiced social grace, placing recording devices in strategic locations while engaging in seemingly innocent conversations with political figures I'd known since childhood. The audio recorder went into Dad's private study during a moment when guests were occupied with dinner service. The video camera was positioned in the dining room, where private meetings would occur after public festivities ended. Mom's personal phone received a tracking device while she was greeting foreign dignitaries, and Bradley Stevens' briefcase was tagged with a GPS transmitter when he set it down during conversations with defense contractor executives. The phone tap installation required accessing the main telephone junction box in the mansion's basement, using skills Colonel Martinez had taught me during our brief training session. Working by flashlight in cramped conditions, I connected monitoring equipment that would transmit all incoming and outgoing calls to Margaret's surveillance network. Conversations throughout the evening revealed the scope of corruption in casual terms that suggested these activities were routine business among the gathered guests. Foreign arms dealers discussed delivery schedules with American military contractors, while politicians coordinated votes on defense appropriations that would benefit their secret business partners. Once Richard becomes Secretary of Defense, our access to classified procurement information will increase exponentially. I overheard one defense contractor explaining to a foreign diplomat, "Current contracts represent small-scale operations compared to what we'll accomplish with insider knowledge of military requirements." Stevens coordinated everything with the efficiency of someone managing a legitimate business operation rather than an international criminal conspiracy. He moved between conversations, ensuring proper connections between politicians and their illegal business partners while maintaining the appearance of standard political networking. As the evening progressed and alcohol loosened tongues, conversations became more explicit about criminal activities. I recorded discussions about assassination target lists, money laundering procedures, and plans for selling classified military technology to hostile foreign governments. The most damaging conversation occurred in Dad's private study, where Stevens met with 3 foreign intelligence operatives to finalize arrangements for accessing American military secrets. Hidden recording equipment captured detailed planning for espionage activities that clearly constituted treason against the United States. But my cover was compromised when Stevens caught me listening outside the study door. His expression shifted from political calculation to deadly threat as he realized I had been gathering intelligence rather than seeking family reconciliation. "Security," he whispered into his communication device, never taking his eyes off my face. "We have a problem that requires immediate resolution." The mansion I'd grown up in suddenly became enemy territory as Stevens' men moved to intercept my escape. Using childhood knowledge of hidden passages and secret rooms, I fled through corridors and stairways that connected to my grandfather's old air raid shelter in the basement. The emergency tunnel my grandfather had built during the Cold War provided escape route to neighboring property, but Stevens' security team was already coordinating pursuit through multiple exit points. My extraction had succeeded in gathering evidence, but escape required evading professional killers in familiar territory that had now become a deadly maze. The mansion basement became a battlefield as I navigated through darkness using childhood memories of secret passages my grandfather had shown me during family visits decades earlier. Stevens' security team spread through the house above, searching systematically while coordinating through radio communication that echoed down heating ducts and ventilation systems. My grandfather's Cold War paranoia had inadvertently created perfect escape infrastructure. Hidden panels behind the furnace opened into tunnels connecting to storm drains that led beneath neighboring Georgetown properties. But reaching the tunnel entrance required crossing 20 feet of open basement space, where armed men were conducting methodical sweeps. The confrontation began when I encountered Stevens himself near the tunnel entrance, armed and clearly prepared to eliminate the threat I represented to his criminal enterprise. Years of political maneuvering had concealed his capacity for personal violence, but his willingness to murder senators' daughters revealed depths of ruthless determination. "You should have stayed married to your mechanic and lived quietly in rural Virginia," he snarled, blocking my access to escape routes. "Instead, you chose to threaten everything we've built over 30 years of careful planning." Behind him, Dad and Mom appeared, their faces reflecting shock and horror as they realized the scope of Stevens' criminal activities and their own unwitting participation in treason against American interests. The evidence I'd gathered was exposing not just corruption, but assassination plots and espionage that threatened national security. "Bradley, what are you talking about?" Dad demanded, his voice shaking as he processed recordings of his own conversations accepting bribes and coordinating illegal arms sales. "I thought we were just managing political contributions and defense contract consulting." Stevens' laugh was cold and calculating as he revealed the truth about their relationship. "You've been my puppet for 15 years, Richard. Every vote, every committee decision, every piece of classified information you accessed was carefully orchestrated to advance our international business operations." Mom's breakdown was immediate and devastating as she understood how thoroughly they'd been manipulated. The charitable organizations, the social events, the political networking we thought was building your career was actually supporting criminal conspiracy against our own country. The revelation that my parents had been victims rather than willing conspirators changed the emotional dynamic completely. Stevens had used blackmail and gradual compromise to transform them into unwitting accomplices, escalating their involvement slowly until escape became impossible. Your father's confirmation as Secretary of Defense represents our final objective. Stevens continued his weapon trained on me while explaining his master plan. Access to classified military procurement information will allow us to corner international arms markets worth hundreds of billions of dollars. But my ace in the hole was ready to be revealed. The photo I'd sent my parents during our wedding reception wasn't just a simple wedding picture showing Jake and me in our formal attire. The background clearly displayed Margaret's evidence wall with every piece of incriminating documentation visible in perfect detail. That photo went viral on social media before your people could suppress it. I announced pulling out my phone to show Stevens the devastating truth. 20 million people have seen your evidence wall, downloaded the images, and shared them across every platform you can't control. The social media explosion was happening in real time. #Hartwell Files was trending worldwide as citizen journalists analyzed the evidence. Foreign governments demanded explanations from American officials, and stock markets crashed in response to defense contractor revelations. Stevens' desperate attempts to suppress the information were failing as millions of internet users shared copied and distributed evidence faster than his organization could track or eliminate. The decentralized nature of social media had defeated centralized information control, exposing his conspiracy through sheer volume of distribution. Emergency congressional sessions are being called. I continued showing Stevens news alerts flooding my phone. FBI raids are beginning at locations identified in the evidence. Your entire network is collapsing faster than you can coordinate damage control. Stevens' rage was consuming as he realized 30 years of careful planning was being destroyed by a single photograph shared through social media platforms his organization had never learned to control effectively. But his desperation made him more dangerous rather than defeated. If we're finished, then everyone involved goes down with us, starting with you, your family, and everyone else who contributed to our exposure. The standoff continued as sirens approached the Georgetown mansion from multiple directions. Federal agents were responding to evidence releases, but Stevens still had enough firepower to eliminate witnesses before surrendering to law enforcement. Jake's rescue mission at the Baltimore warehouse was reaching its climax simultaneously. Armed confrontation with Stevens' security team required military tactics Colonel Martinez had taught him during their brief preparation time. Emma's freedom depended on precise coordination between rescue operation and evidence exposure. Margaret's data release was achieving maximum impact as encrypted files reached journalists, government officials, and international allies faster than the corruption ring could prevent distribution. 25 years of patient intelligence gathering was finally producing the justice she'd sacrificed everything to achieve. The convergence of all three operations created perfect chaos that overwhelmed Stevens' ability to maintain control through violence and intimidation. His criminal empire was crumbling in real time as evidence exposure triggered immediate law enforcement response and international diplomatic consequences. Federal agents surrounded the Georgetown mansion as Stevens made his last desperate attempt to escape justice through violence. The FBI response team had mobilized within minutes of receiving Margaret's evidence files, coordinating with military police and congressional security to prevent destruction of additional proof or elimination of witnesses. Stevens' security team found themselves outnumbered and outgunned as law enforcement closed escape routes throughout the neighborhood. Their radio communications were intercepted and jammed, while tactical units moved into position around every potential exit point. The standoff in the mansion basement lasted only minutes once federal agents breached the main entrances. Stevens surrendered when faced with overwhelming force, his decades-long criminal enterprise finally defeated by the evidence he'd tried so desperately to suppress. Jake's rescue of Emma succeeded despite fierce resistance from warehouse security forces. Colonel Martinez's tactical planning and Jake's mechanical knowledge of industrial buildings combined to create successful extraction under hostile conditions. Both survived with minor injuries, while Emma's captors were captured alive for interrogation about additional criminal activities. Margaret's evidence distribution achieved global impact within hours of release. International news organizations confirmed the authenticity of financial documents, recording transcripts and photographic proof that exposed corruption reaching the highest levels of American government. The legal consequences unfolded with unprecedented speed and scope. Stevens was charged with treason, conspiracy murder, and violations of every major federal law regarding government corruption and national security. His organization faced complete dismantlement as prosecutors worked through evidence involving hundreds of criminal acts spanning 30 years. 37 politicians were arrested across party lines as investigators followed financial trails and communication records that documented their participation in illegal activities. The bipartisan nature of corruption shocked American citizens and forced comprehensive reform of campaign finance and defense contracting procedures. Defense contractor executives found themselves facing international war crimes tribunals as evidence revealed sales of American military technology to hostile foreign governments. The scope of treason required cooperation between American prosecutors and international law enforcement agencies pursuing justice for crimes affecting global security. Foreign intelligence operatives were expelled from the United States as diplomatic relations were strained by revelations of espionage activities conducted through American political corruption. International allies demanded explanations and reassurances about compromised security information that might have affected their own national interests. Dad's resignation from the Senate became effective immediately as he cooperated fully with federal investigators, seeking to understand the full scope of Stevens' manipulation and control. His decision to provide evidence against the criminal organization resulted in reduced sentences in exchange for testimony that helped prosecutors understand recruitment and manipulation techniques used against other political victims. Mom began intensive therapy to process her unwitting participation in activities that contradicted every value she claimed to support throughout her political life career. Her genuine remorse and commitment to making amends contributed to family healing that had seemed impossible during the immediate crisis. Emma's ordeal as Stevens' hostage strengthened her resolve to pursue criminal justice studies, inspired by her sister's courage and determined to help protect other potential victims of political corruption. Her transfer to a different university provided fresh start away from Georgetown's political environment. Margaret's emergence from deep cover after 25 years of sacrifice was recognized through presidential pardon and classified medals honoring her service to American national security. Her intelligence work had prevented immeasurable damage to military capabilities and international relationships. The Millfield community embraced Jake and me as symbols of authentic American values, triumphing over political corruption and social pretension. Jake's auto repair business expanded to employ veterans recommended by Colonel Martinez's network, creating meaningful work for military personnel transitioning to civilian careers. Our second wedding ceremony took place 6 months later in Millfield's town square, surrounded by community members who had supported us throughout the crisis and reconciled family members who had learned the difference between authentic relationships and political calculation. Margaret's farmhouse was rebuilt using recovered stolen money designated for veterans programs and community infrastructure projects. The new structure honored her intelligence service while providing normal family environment for the grandchildren she hoped to spoil in coming years. Jake and I purchased 40 acres adjacent to Margaret's property, creating space for both his expanding business operations and my new career as an investigative journalist, specializing in government accountability and corruption exposure. My articles about the experience inspired nationwide movements for political transparency and citizen involvement in demanding accountability from elected officials. Social media campaigns continued exposing corruption at local levels as ordinary Americans refused to be intimidated by powerful interests threatening democratic institutions. The Defense Department underwent comprehensive reform to prevent future infiltration by criminal organizations seeking access to classified information. New oversight procedures and security protocols were implemented to protect military secrets while maintaining necessary international cooperation. Economic justice was achieved through recovery of billions in stolen taxpayer money that was redirected toward legitimate defense programs and veteran support services. The financial impact of corruption had damaged American military readiness while enriching international criminal organizations at taxpayers' expense. Our personal happiness grew from authentic relationships built on shared values rather than social status or political calculation. Working together in our garden behind the farmhouse, Jake and I created space for raising children who would understand the difference between genuine achievement and inherited privilege. Margaret's influence on our family provided wisdom gained through decades of sacrifice in service to truth and justice. Her stories about intelligence work taught valuable lessons about recognizing deception and maintaining integrity under pressure from corrupt authorities. The photograph that started everything now hangs framed in our kitchen, reminding us daily that ordinary people possess power to defeat corruption when they choose courage over comfort. Truth ultimately triumphs over manipulation when citizens refuse to be intimidated by those who abuse positions of public trust. American democracy survived because ordinary people chose to fight rather than surrender to systematic corruption threatening the foundations of representative government. Jake's mechanical skills, Margaret's intelligence training, and my inherited determination combined to protect institutions that belong to citizens rather than criminal organizations. Our daughter was born 9 months later, inheriting a country where courage and integrity had defeated corruption and restored faith in democratic institutions. Margaret teaches her granddaughter about honesty, hard work, and the responsibility every American has to protect freedom for future generations. The life lesson that emerged from our struggle resonates with everyone who faces seemingly impossible odds against powerful enemies. Truth combined with courage can defeat any corruption when ordinary people refuse to surrender their principles for temporary safety or social acceptance. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? Sometimes the people we love most make decisions that test our values and force us to decide who we really want to be. I'd love to hear about times when you've had to stand up for your beliefs even when it was difficult or costly. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories about ordinary people overcoming extraordinary challenges. Share this with anyone who needs to remember that courage and integrity can triumph over corruption and intimidation. Thank you for listening to my story and for believing that truth and justice still matter in America. I wish you the strength to stand up for what's right, no matter how difficult the circumstances may seem.